everyone, a very, very warm welcome to the Drama Awards workshop. I'm hoping that this 45 minutes is going to be the font of all inspiration to give you guys lots of hints and tips in how you enter award shows. Now, I know that a lot of people watching, some of you are veterans, you've already entered many, I'm sure many of you have won already, but there's a lot of people that are new to this game, and actually it's not as easy as it sounds, but actually when you learn how to do it, it's actually not as hard as you think. So there you go. So what we're going to do is we are going to hear from 3 amazing guests. Thank you guys for joining us. And what we're going to do now is do an intro. So Ellie, can you do the honours and intro yourself first?
Thanks, Lynn. I'm Ellie Edwards-Scott, and I'm co-founder of the Advisory Collective, which is a digital consultancy, and judged many awards over the years.
You have indeed. This lady knows her stuff. And
this is Anamika Gupta, and I head customer marketing for Fujitsu Americas, and very happy to be on the panel with you, Lynn.
I know if I get your name pronounced wrong, I've known you for all this time, and I feel I've maybe not said it right. Is it Anamika?
Yeah, it's Anamika.
Anamika, oh my God, now everybody's looking to see if I can get it right. Okay, here goes. And Steve, can you intro yourself, please?
Hi, Lynn. Hi, everyone. I'm Steve. I'm the general manager for Birdseye, the frozen food brand company. And delighted to be on the panel.
Thank you. So, okay, we're going to jazz this up now. And what we're going to do is give people a bit of a scene setter, because to put yourself or to put people in your shoes, you obviously judge lots of awards. So the way it works is I'll explain how we do the judging at the Drum. So basically people will typically enter, obviously there's lots of categories, there'll be multiple entries. And what we do with our jury is we split them into groups. And those groups, we split them in a certain way based on their skill set, no conflicts of interest, so they're not allowed to go anywhere near an entry they might have entered. So we make sure that it's very transparent. And then that group will then pre-read all the entries in that particular category, and they'll then rate them alone, so they won't have any involvement from anyone else. They'll rate them, and then from that we correlate the collective scores, and we bring them together. This year it's been virtual, normally it is in person, but I think virtuals work really well. But we bring them together, and then we showcase how the entries have scored collectively, and it's really then down to that group to decide whether that was right, or whether, you know, they have debates, and then maybe something that scored not as high might rise to the top because maybe a judge has seen something that someone else has not seen. So that's kind of how it works, and then they will decide collectively on the winner and the commendation, and also they might give more than one of each depending on how good your entries are. So bearing in mind that's the sort of starting point. So what I would love to do is for you guys, maybe Steve, we'll start with you, to give an insight into, like, when you go to judge an awards show, where do you start? You've got a lot of entries. Like, what do you do first? Do you read the exec summary? Do you look at the pictures? What do you do? Steve, tell us what you do.
Always attracted by the pictures, but yeah, the exec summary and is probably the most important part, actually, because that's where you are crystallizing the story that you're about to, you know, go through in terms of the entry. So whatever happens as a judge, you know, people have spent a lot of time and hard effort, so you have to make sure that you know, as a judge, you really appreciate that, and you spend enough time on each entry. But essentially what you're looking for in general terms as a judge is it's a story, isn't it? So you know, as a person writing the award, you're trying to tell a story about a business or not-for-profit situation, whatever, you know, trying to explain a context and then a problem or an insight, a business problem or consumer insight, and then how the agency or client, or ideally you do it collaboratively, solve that problem in an imaginative way, and then what the result is. It's the same kind of formula you're looking at. Whatever the entry topic, it's that same flow. It's kind of a story with it's a classic. It's like a fairy tale in a way. You know, you're looking for that classic opening, you know, and just something that's going to stand out from the crowd, going to have some kind of X factor to it, if you like, a bit of inspiration, but then also has an outcome. So you're looking for kind of a style, and you're looking for substance as well.
Yeah, so for you, the exec summary is really important, because I suppose that tells the tale of what's to come.
Yeah, it's the scene setter, isn't it? So if you're not grabbed by then, you're going into the rest of it either thinking, oh, this is potential to be dull, or you're kind of, okay, I'm intrigued to find out and learn more here. There's something interesting here.
Yeah, okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. And Ellie, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, to echo what Steve said, I think it is a story, and some people forget that story. And it's good to have that formula. And you can, I've judged, Lynn, I've judged many of your awards, been fortunate enough to judge over the years, great. And you can see entrants that are seasoned, writing awards or entering awards, because there is that process. And I think I also make sure that summary relates to the criteria, the awards criteria, and it's so interesting. It may seem very simple, but often I've read, a really good entrant, but it's not actually for the right category. You look at it and you think, oh, have you put it in the right place? And it's, and you just think, oh, if you'd have tweaked this or made it even more relevant. So the summary and the overall entrant had really got to match the awards criteria. If you're entering for, best use of audio, make sure you include that, bring the campaign to life by including the visuals or video or audio, whatever that may be, to really have a cohesive story.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think as well, there's people that are watching, and I know we get a question in from someone who's just new to the game. So they've come into a role and suddenly they've been dumped with all the award entries and they're like, whoa. So I guess, that narrative that you've went through is really nice for them, because it's like, there is a bit of a process, and we might come to that in a minute about what good and bad looks like. So I'm going to try to say your name again. So Anmika, did I get that right? Is that my feeling?
Close. That's okay. Yeah, I mean, just like Ellie and Steve, I definitely start with the executive summary. That pulls me first, and then the first thing I do is like read objective after executive summary, and then I go into the results. I skip to the results very quickly. It's like, what is that results talking? Because if I'm able to relate between objective and results, I'm sure there's something X factor which is going in between the part of it, right? It's like, what is that I did to achieve that objective? How did I get this result, right? Now, to Steve's point, I think executive summary should kind of highlight that. You should highlight your objective in a very short and sweet way, as effectively as you could, and then bring out that X factor. Because if you can't, the judges doesn't get hooked to it. So when I read the executive summary, it excites me because I can read the objective very quickly. I see the X factor and I see the results. So it kind of, it helps me kind of understand, hey, this is going to be the one fun entry I'm going to read. I'm going to spend my time here. So yes, please make sure that you're spending good amount of time on executive summary. My suggestion would be, start with the executive summary writing, then write your entire entry, and then go back to executive summary. Because that ways, whatever you have written, you want to bring back, maybe when you're writing the entire entry, you realize maybe I missed few things. And when you go and read the executive summary before submitting, you'll realize you missed 1, 2, 3. And then you kind of bring that, highlight that. So executive summary is very important. Yes, that's where I start too.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that would have been the common answer amongst all of you, so I was right. I got that one right. And I suppose it's a bit like, that's how you decide how you're going to read a book, isn't it? You read the back and you check, and if it grabs your interest. And I think, to your point, a lot of people in the exec summary do actually put some result driven, and they just tease you in with, this is what we achieved. And you're like, oh, and you did this. Oh, tell me a little bit more. So talking about how people write entries, now we did have a really good question around the use of jargon. It's probably one of my personal pet hates. So, I mean, we'll talk about negatives and positives as well. But, Ellie, what do you think? When someone starts throwing jargon words, I mean, obviously, when it comes to programmatic, you know your stuff, but does it put you off? Or
I think, jargon for jargon's sake definitely does put you off as a judge. Coming back to a point that Steve mentioned earlier, in fact, when you are judging multiple entries, and it can be a long process, and you want it to be, because you know that people have taken a long time over their awards entry, so you want to give it that time. I like entries that stand out, clever use of language, or bringing something out, teasing. Just making it a little bit different, because bearing in mind, if you're judging 9 or 11 awards back to back in one category, it can be a bit samey. So it's like, what's different? What's new? How do you highlight it in the language? But yeah, jargon for jargon's sake, I think just puts any judge off. And we can see it, we can feel it. You know, we know that those words have been put in there, not because, you know, you want to really highlight the KPIs. Or it's done to make us think, oh, wow, they must be really good because they've used loads of jargon. So don't use it for the sake of it. Definitely not.
I think as well, the other key point in that is, remember when we collect our judges, a lot of people obviously have knowledge in that area, but we might get a creative mind in, or we might get some other skill sets that really help give a sort of diverse view. And sometimes they're like, what? Well, what about you, Steve? I'm sure you love jargon. And
I think it's, I don't mind jargon, but I think you just have to be careful. There is a lot of jargon in our game, right? And a lot of it, you know, there's a lot of frameworks and theories in marketing and communications, and many of those have endured for decades and are well accepted. So, you know, phrases like household penetration, market share, so all the basic ones that help describe a business situation, fine. But those ones that just smack of the moment and, you know, over elaborate. So, you know, some growth hacking, I mean, that's one at the moment that I just like, makes me feel a bit, what does that mean? It's just growth, right? You know, where you're kind of over elaborating. I was mentioning, I'll share with everyone else, the one I saw last week that really, if I saw it, it would just put me off, actually. It was tofu, mofu and bofu, top of the funnel, middle of the funnel. So it's just like, it's just clever for its own sake, and just be wary, because it can smack of a bit of superficiality, I would say. But if it's well accepted business or marketing or communication jargon that helps you know, evaluate specific metrics or what have you, or frameworks or theories, then that's absolutely fine. Just be careful not to be sucked in and be a kind of trendy kind of windswept marketing or advertising person, is what I would say.
Be cool, but don't try and be too cool. And Anrika, what do you think?
I'm not so different with what Ellie and Steve said. Absolutely no to jargon to me, because the more simpler you are, keep it simple, because judges are human like you. So, you know, they'd really love to hear your entry. They want to hear, you know, what X factor or what difference you had, what creativity you had, what innovation you had. And you don't need the support of jargon words to kind of, you know, put in there. So just keep it simple. Just talk about what your objectives were. Make sure to relate to the story of the objectives and the goals you're putting. Make sure to highlight the results, and you can do it in a very simple words. So you don't have to have the jargon. So don't sweat there. Just put all your energy into writing the right entry.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is, some people feel pressured to sound smarter than what they are, but actually your innovation and your idea and your creative flair does all of that. You almost don't need to try, you know. So we see it often. I mean, you know, that sort of brings me back then to the do's and the don'ts. You know, I don't think there's any simple way of ever doing anything, because each, you know, service or brand and idea is very different. But would you have sort of key principles? So Anmika, I'll come back to you first, but what do you think in terms of the do's then? But what would, you know, we were talking about the things that sort of entice you in, you know, can you maybe elaborate on what some of those might be?
So for me, I think when I start entering, or even as a judge, you know, when I look at first, my recommendation would be to all the people who are entering is to make sure that you're reviewing the category first. Okay, don't go look at your work and then come and review the category. First, review the categories, and then you go ahead and look at what all work you have done in the organization, right? And what qualifies for those categories in there, right? So that ways you are spending the right amount of time, not just going through your work and then you go back and say, hey, this category doesn't exist, because entering for the right category is very important. Judges really look for that. It's like, if this sits in the right category. There has been situations where we come back and said, this doesn't apply to the category. And I think Drum has been very lenient in terms of saying, if it doesn't apply to this category, which category does it apply to? And they have been really lenient and kind of, you know, putting in that category. But there's been some situations where it doesn't apply to any categories. So we'll have to just say that it doesn't qualify, right? So that's right there. All your energy kind of just goes in vain. So make sure that you're reviewing your categories very well. Second point is less is more. So, don't have to go beyond the word count. So review the word count. And I think you don't have to stick to the word count. Sometimes you can go like very creative, but just don't overdo it. Because if you're able to convey something in 1,000 words or 1,200 words, I think, all you're going to do is like add more jargons to it, make it 1,800, and it's not going to put you into a different, or uniquely against other submissions. So that's my second one. Let's make sure that, less is more. And trust me, I'll tell you, when you go to I need to write in less words, that's where you put more energy, because you try to understand, how can I convince a judge that my entry was the unique one? So yes, please make sure to spend time there. Third will be tell a great story. When I say great story, we all are marketers, right? And, or maybe we are submitting these categories into marketing categories, saying why my work was unique, creative, right? So you really need to be a storyteller to say that. I would say, please make sure, as I've been telling, objective. What was your marketing objective when you started with, right? Yeah. Tee that up with, look at the results first when you're writing the goals, and then you say what my results was, and then you talk about in between what the creativity, innovation, right? That kind of makes you stand out. And when you're doing that, make sure you're talking about your audience, because that really matters. You're not talking to the world. You're talking to a specific group of people, and that's why your entry is different. And that's why it made you kind of give the results which you kind of are presenting to the judges. So make sure you're talking about our audience and highlighting them, because when I understand who your audience was, it helps me understand your entry much better, right? And then also share, make sure that you're highlighting the budget. Your budget could be kind of literally enormous, and sometimes in millions. And so few people do this in a couple of $1,000s. It kind of gives me an idea how creative you were. I have seen some of the entries, people have done so creatively with very small amount of budget, right? So that's my third point. And final point, give yourself enough time when you're writing the entry. So it is not I'm going to do this in the next 2 hours. No, please give yourself a week's time or more, and bring your ecosystem who was part of that work, because you cannot write everything. So bring your ecosystem to tell you the story. And when you do that, you're the one who are compiling it, right? So have somebody who compiles it in a much better way. But then your ecosystem should be part of it when you're writing the story. So those are some of my points, Lynn.
Wow, I think you covered a lot of ground there. So I'm not going to put Steve and Ellie on the spot. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was going to say, you've covered so many points. It's been fantastic. I'd say a couple of things that I would add to it is definitely the time element. So, it's a good award entry will take, you're gathering all the relevant information from those different departments. You're putting it together. You're crafting that story. So don't underestimate the amount of time that it's going to take and it should take to do that. So be careful of the deadline. I would say also maybe have somebody outside the team to look at it, because it's like anything. When you're working on a project and you're very much involved in it, you can maybe not be as objective, or maybe somebody externally will from another team will pick up on something, the way that it's being worded, or something that you've taken for granted because you've worked on that piece of work, hasn't actually translated in the entrant. So it's good to get an objective viewpoint. And I'd say things like spelling and grammar. I mean, I'm a real stickler for that. So if I see that, it kind of really, it's not going to make me throw out a good entrant, but I just think, why didn't you do this? Or if you're saying you're going to include a video, make sure it's the right video, make sure it's the right length. I think those little hygiene factors are important.
Absolutely. And we got a question in there around, does it have to have an international component? So the answer is no. I mean, it depends what you're entering, doesn't it? If your campaign is international, then damn tootin', you should have an international component, and if it's not, then no. It's just the art of writing. But we're going to come to that in a minute about, especially the small and the large companies and where they kind of fence off each other. So Steve, I'm going to incorporate one of the questions into hopefully your answer on this, but someone's asking around entering supporting material, whether it be videos, images, whatever it might be. What's your kind of feeling around that? Like, how much is too much, or should they not do it at all? Or what do you think?
Yeah, I think if it's not overdoing it, it can really help, actually. So having some supporting material in terms of data, graphs, consumer research results, market share, all those things will help add substance, which is often where a lot of entries fall down, is the substance of what actual impact did it have on the brand or business. But by the same measure, videos can work, but if they're like if you consider, if you're a judge, you're potentially judging 20-25 entries, and if you've got 3-4 minute videos to go through, you multiply that by the number of entries, it's really time consuming, and to be honest, on a case where they're too long, you're kind of scrolling through a little bit. But if they're short, snappy, 1 minute max type summaries of your story to bring it to life, then I think they can help. They're by no means a must. They're by no means, so it doesn't compensate for a badly written entry that you've got a nice flashy video. But if it complements it in the right way, in a very succinct way, and if you have some really good, especially supporting data, especially results, and especially business outcomes or organizational outcomes that support your case, supporting material could help. And I would echo the point from Anamika on collaboration, on getting the extended team to get those, because the best ones you can see are the ones that are collaborations between clients and agencies versus you'll get more richness of substance in terms of results and outcomes in that way. So I would advocate for it, but don't go crazy on it, is what I would say.
It's really interesting because I know some judges and the way they navigate, everybody's different. This is what we've got to remember. You're appealing to the human, and everybody is humanly different. So I know some judges who go for the exec summary, and if there's a video, that's the next thing. That's the way they would do sort of their journey. And I know that other people don't do that. So it is a bit of I think to your point, brevity, keep it concise. And if you've got something to add, as long as it adds value in the right kind of way, then absolutely do it. But I don't want people to, to your point, Steve, people shouldn't be put off if you don't have this flashy video, or if you can tell a good story, you don't need it. So you kind of have to be fair in both of them. I mean, when it comes to, we get a lot of people that worry because some people don't have the big budgets, right? So there may be the smaller, and not even necessarily a charity, they're just a small company or a small agency. They don't have millions behind them to throw a campaign. So what kind of reassurance would you give to people, not to be frightened to enter against the sort of big boys, if you like? So Amika, what do you think on that?
I would actually say do not be afraid at all, because when your judges looks at those entries, they don't go by the budget. They go by, what is that you have done? Like, your creativity, your innovation, what did you achieve, the metrics, the results. And as I was telling, I think I have just this year quite a few entries. There were like two streams of it. One was like, $1 million budget they had, and the few were like a couple of $1,000s. And I'll tell you, we as a judges, we took a very different stance. And I think we got to drum back and say, we would like to actually give these entries a special recognition because they did extraordinarily well within the given budget, which you couldn't have, right? I mean, they were extraordinary. So we actually created a different category, and Drum kind of, literally supported that. So that thanks to you and the team there. But, also against, as I said, we don't go first by the budget. So first of all, we look at that, if the entries are standing out or not, right? So you can do things with $1 million budget, but maybe it didn't give the results which you might have, right? So always make sure that you're relating with the objective and the metrics together, and the innovation, the creativity. So yes, please do not be afraid of entering, even if it's a small budget, even if it's like, a small company or big company. It is like for everybody, and everybody should bring out those creativity and innovation.
Definitely. I mean, I love the inclusivity of it because, I've been in probably, I think now about maybe 300 judging rooms. Oh my God, it makes me feel ancient. But I've been in a lot of judging rooms, and I hear the chat from so many different viewpoints. And, and generally budget doesn't come into it. If anything, if the idea is poor, it's like, what? They wasted that budget? So it's not only that, but generally it's the sort of idea is the beating pulse of it. And I'll come to that in a second, but to sort of pick up on what you were saying about creating the new category. So I don't know if people realise this, but the judges do have quite a bit of power in that if, for example, they're feeling generous, they could technically move an entry into a different category, but that's at chance sake. So I would always suggest you enter where you think you should be placed, because there's no guarantee a judge will do that. And equally, they might discount it if it's in the wrong place. It just depends. Again, you're dealing with a human. It depends how much they fall in love with your entry. Now, one of the things that I wanted to sort of touch on was, we talk about the big companies, the small companies, and we talk about the budget, but ultimately we need to see through that and really look at the idea. As I said, that is the beating heart, the pulse of the whole thing. So I'm going to share with you guys a video that it was basically a campaign that ran for Carlsberg. Now, Steve judged this, so Steve can talk about it, I'm sure very knowledgeably. But the thing to bear in mind, whilst it's Carlsberg, it's not because it's Carlsberg we're showing it. It's more to do with the idea and what they've done a little bit differently and how they became quite brave. So I'm going to mute, because if I don't, you'll get really horrible noise and you don't want to hear that. And then we're going to play it and we'll talk afterwards, okay?
We can't say that, can we?
That's nasty.
Carlsberg tastes like the rancid of Satan.
I don't know what to say to that.
Carlsberg tastes like naan bread.
Carlsberg tastes like a bitter divorce.
Oh my word.
Steve, so I'm going to come to you because you obviously judged this. So give us your take on what you thought was good about it and why it won.
Sure, Lynn. So, so hopefully the video was self-explanatory and clear, but, essentially Carlsberg were undertaking a product improvement project, which is very common for an FMCG or product brand. You're always looking to renovate and make your products better. And that can be one of the hardest things to market, actually, or to communicate, because consumers are a bit bombarded with the new improved formula or better tasting or more refreshing, and then the conventional way is you just flash it on pack and it ends up being blah, essentially. But the way Carlsberg faced into a product problem that they had, actually, and used the slogan that they've been famous for decades around probably the best lager in the world, and to put their hands up and say, actually, our product doesn't measure up, and this is what we're doing about it, and to use the mean tweets and their staff as well, bringing them into it to face into the fact that they had a product problem and be transparent and brave enough to do that was just a very, very quite a confrontational thing to do, both with consumers and culturally internally, quite scary. So it was a first, in terms of originality, massive tick, because not many brands will have the bravery to behave in that way. Leveraging existing brand assets, so actually using their well-known slogan, but in a completely upside down way. But the thing that was impressive about the entry was it wasn't just about the marketing and the PR stunt. It was about how that followed through their business into a better product that actually visibly delivered versus the current in testing, and then it actually drove really good business results as well. So you know, one of the things that can be an issue when judging awards, you get a lot of data on reach and engagement, for example, and how many people tweeted it or liked it on Facebook or what have you, which is good, and that's a good foundation. You drive awareness, but you don't get the, okay, did they sell more beer? Did you sell more of the product or service? And they did. This led to a direct, you know, ROI, if you like, from that activity, combined with the investment in the product quality, direct to a kind of business results as well. So that's a perfect example of, you know, imagination, inspiration, but also the hard working, the perspiration, if you like, and the substance behind it and the results. That's why that was, you know, that was such a successful, and it's just stood out. It's the one of the emotions that you're always trying to get in a judge is jealousy, actually, envy of, I wish my agency, you know, like, wow, that's, how did they even get to that? So that, you know, try and think of that. What is that kind of story that will invoke that bit of fair play, you know, it's kind of, that's brilliant kind of thing. And that was definitely one.
Well, the good news is it's not the first time we've had a judging where the judges said, who did that entry? Very interested in that agency. So it can work in your benefit. I mean, I suppose when you look at something like that, it's not, you know, obviously it's not a new idea per se, but I think the beauty of it is that a brand took it and they were really risky with it. So I think that, you know, so I suppose originality comes into it in some form or other. But yeah, I thought it was a great example. I mean, you know, you were talking about obviously the metrics and the data. You know, someone's asked a question, and Ellie, will come to you about this. How much is too much detail? Like, can you get buried in the detail? You're like, oh my God, okay, stop already. Or actually, do you want more and more? What would you encourage?
If the detail is important, I think, so don't underestimate the detail. You know, it comes again back down to the objective. So in your summary, what was the objective of the campaign? Remember, you know, we are coming at this with completely fresh pair of eyes. So paint the story for us. What did you actually achieve? Don't just say something really like amazing results, or, you know, the client was really pleased. Actually, what were those results? And I like to see the detail. I'm a bit of a geek maybe in that way, but I want to see the numbers. I want to see, you know, where the base that you started from and actually how you grew it, or how you got that audience engagement, or what. I just think it brings it to life. So, you know, it's the same, I suppose, answer about the jargon. You know, you're not putting it in for the sake of it, but if it's relevant to the brief, if it's relevant to bring to life what was achieved, then definitely, you know, I'm interested in that detail. Yeah.
Yeah, I think some people are very, you're better having it in than not, but just tell us in a good way. Yeah, because
otherwise you'll look at the entry and you'll, you know, as I say, remember when people are judging, you generally judge multiple awards, entries, one after another. So detail, when that innovation and that humour, that will make your entrance stand out and actually think, oh wow, that was really good. Yeah. You know, they did something really great. So yeah, it's important.
Well, while we're on the kind of track of results, so Amika, I'm going to come to you. So we've had a very challenging year. I think it's an understatement to point out the obvious. So next year, obviously, where the entry sort of time frame works, it's going to be within this hellish time. You know, that's just the nature of the beast. So what do you think judges are going to look for next year? So, you know, there'll be companies that enter that they've maybe still got amazing ideas, but, you know, potentially depending on your market segment, the results might not be as good as what they maybe would have been. Some will be up because it was a bumper year for that particular audience. Like, what are judges looking for? Is it the pivot? What is it?
I think to me as judge, that won't change much, because it will still be more about, because if in this tough market, and this, like the market we are right now with the pandemic, what's going on, we all had to shift. We all had to shift and be agile in terms of how we are responding to it. So we had to make changes to our marketing plan, to our business plan, to our client outreach, right? So as a judge, I would like to see, how did you make that shift, right? I mean, what was your changed goal? Because again, it's still about your objectives. So what was your changed goal? And how did you try to be more innovative, more creative, to your audience? And then what did it kind of give you as a result? Because if you made that shift, you definitely shifted your goal and your results too. So you brought some expectation, which is needed to your leadership team, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing that. So as a judge, I really would like to kind of see that. It's not about that if you kind of got the result which you would got in the normal scenario. If this was a normal scenario, your objective was also different, right? Your goal was also different. Also remember that a target audience today in this noisy world, the attention span is less than a goldfish. Literally, it's less than a goldfish. So I would love to see how you got that attention of your audience, right? So that kind of really piques my interest a lot, because it's such a noisy world. Everybody got on a webinar. Everybody is doing things virtually. Everybody is saying, I'm going to reach out to the client. So think about a client who's receiving so many different information, how they're filtering things out. So were you being creative to be in that filter as they were filtering? Is like, hey, yeah, this guy is standing me out and I'm going to listen to this guy, right? And that kind of generates the results you're looking for. So I would love to see those creativity.
Great. Well, I mean, we've all been very positive here, and I would love to do the round robin and ask every question, but I think there's just so much I want to cover, and people are like wanting this information. So we've all been very positive, very upbeat. So I'm going to turn to Steve, to the Simon Cowell of the group, because what don't you like?
I'm not sure I like that, the Simon Cowell of the group.
Obviously much more handsome than Simon Cowell, but the Simon Cowell of the group nonetheless. But what annoys you? What do you see in an entry that really hacks you off and you're like, that's just taking it down a few steps for me? Okay,
well, we mentioned earlier the jargon superficiality and avoiding that. You can see through that. The other thing that I do find frustrating is when what I think the drum does really well is kind of the criteria, what the criteria for the entry. So what kind of information, what kind of sections, and what I find really frustrating is when entries really over-index on one of the parts of that criteria, but neglect or are really superficial on another area, which is a massive shame because it's a lot of wasted effort, but without kind of completing the loop. So just taking and it links a bit to the point. There was another question on, do you focus on one or two categories, or do you spread across to maximize your chances? Well, my view in general would be the former, because sometimes you can tell where people have just tried to enter more and more categories, but just haven't spent enough time and focus to really get it right. And it's just a waste of time. It's just a waste of time when you don't do it thoroughly, because there'll be someone that's a lot better and stronger. So it's kind of answering each of the questions, the criteria. You'd be really, it's really surprising how many times entries fail on that. Was that Simon Cowell enough?
That was good, yeah. I'm really impressed. I'll see if you can give you a job. I suppose the other thing I would say is you also get the opposite, don't you? When you come to a category, you're like, why didn't they blooming enter that? So you're between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, true.
When you do, my advice would be just seeing this over and over. If you are going to enter multiples, and there's no reason you can't, if you tick the boxes, and to Steve's point,
do it properly. That's the point.
Don't enter if you're not going to hit the criteria, but if you are, make sure you change the title on your category. Make sure the client's testimonial is good to what you've done. And we've seen other things like, and I've said this is a story I tell quite often, but I've seen entries before where they leave the track marks on. Yeah. And it's like, did the client really say that? Check that stat out. And it's like, oh my God, your entry's blown up. Yeah.
And it's if you've got a strong enough story, you can enter it across, but the point is that you can tell when it's copy paste. You have to respect the specific category and criteria for that category. And there was another question about put how much detail and quite specific channel elements, I think, from Sam. It depends on the awards. If it's about multi-channel marketing, of course you're going to want that. So you have to make sure you're cutting your cloth accordingly. It's fine to enter, but not just a sort of scattergun. You really have to give the sort of love and attention and care, I would say.
No, that makes sense.
just to pull in, and Steve kind of mentioned, make sure that you're tweaking it to that particular category, because you cannot just say, I'm going to copy, paste, change the title, and going to submit it for the next category. It doesn't work that way. You have to tweak the tone, the attitude, the angle, just a little bit to fit into that category, because now you're competing against the similar other submissions for that particular category, and you don't want to lose. Even if your story is great and you don't tune it to that category, judges just tune out, right? So they don't have enough time to kind of understand that maybe this is what you're trying to say, right? So you really want to take that effort and spend time. Again, please do not say, I'm going to do this in 2 hours of time. So if you're applying it to different category, spend writing for the first category, and you say which other category I can apply to, and spend time in tweaking that message. Don't leave it to the judges to do it for you. Definitely. Right? That's one point. Second point I wanted to make in terms of like, please, and this I missed on sharing when I was sharing the list of mine, when I look at it from the judge's perspective, I see many a times, most of the entries, they do not share the challenges they faced. It's very obvious for me as a judge to understand, because I've been into marketing forever, that you might not have faced any challenges when you were executing it. So when you highlight that, it gives me an impression you have gone through that cycle of like, as you were trying to reach the success or achieve the success you have just highlighted. So when you share the challenge you had, it also gives me an indication that, my goodness, this entry or the submission literally kind of had this challenge which got to the peak of it, and they came out of it, and they came out so successfully. So that kind of, even if kind of you're not too creative and you show that challenge you had and how it kind of came out of it, it kind of literally gives me that boost. It's like, this is amazing. And trust me, everybody's facing challenges. It's not just you or me. It's everybody who faces challenges when any initiative is done. So make sure you highlight that. Take time. You don't have to over-exaggerate it, but then at least put it in there.
Okay, well, before we wrap up, I want to come to Ellie. So I'm going to ask you all for a quick, brief roundup, because I'm conscious to get near to the time. But Ellie, if you can tell us in short, now, some people, and this is where I feel quite passionate about awards, until you lose, you're a winner. So the minute you're nominated, you haven't lost. So you're a marketing expert as well. You and not only in your own business, but you consult lots of other organizations who enter our awards. Well, what advice would you give? Like, how do you go for the win when you're just nominated? What do you do to make the most of that?
Oh, how do you go for the win when you're just nominated? That's an interesting question. I think you can, as you say, just entering is a good thing. I think entering awards, it gets your name out there as an agency. It you build that rapport with your clients. It kind of, you're working on a joint project together. It can bring together different departments. So I think even going through the awards entry process is a really good thing for businesses of all shapes and sizes. I've judged awards from small charities to large multinationals, and I think it's a really important process for companies to go through. So I think just even stepping up to the plate and saying I'm going to go for it puts you in that, that's a great thing. That's a winning mindset.
It's a mental attitude, isn't it? I mean, even from as simple as putting on your website, talking to your clients who are nominated companies. Exactly. We're all marketers, so we should do this stuff. So,
and you should shout about it as well. You make sure. I mean, me with social media, you have to shout about it. You shout about it internally, though. I think even no matter the size of a company, it's a great way to collaborate. We talked about the current times that we're in. Actually, there's some great work going on, and it may be harder because you're doing it remotely. And the fact of galvanizing, pulling people together to enter an award is a really good thing. So yeah, it should be celebrated.
I remember years ago we used to do a legal awards, and the legal industry, or they don't call themselves an industry, a profession, hated people promoting the fact that they had even won. They're just showing off. They're not modest enough, and it was, oh my god. So it's completely not marketing people. So to round up, then we're going to go round everyone, and if you can give everyone your 3 top tips when it comes to entering awards. So Steve, let's start with you.
Okay, so my 3 top tips. Number 1, have style in the entry, but also substance. Telling the story. Number 2, pour your heart and your pride into of you and your client and collaborate together on it, because that will come through in the paper. And number three, remember, it's not just communication or marketing outcomes, ideally business outcomes as well, or not-for-profit outcomes if it's not for profit. Those would be my three.
Thank you. Amika?
First, I would say step up to enter. I mean, that's first thing. You really need to make up your mind and say, I'm going to enter for all the categories where I can fit, right? So that's first thing. When you make up that mind, now when you make up that mind, make sure that you tell a greater story. You're going to say, I'm going to tell a greater story. And that greater story, you need to ensure that you're talking about your objectives, you're talking about the execution, creativity, innovation in that execution, and the results. So that's second. The third one, be lenient to yourself. Give yourself some time. Okay, so when you know these entries are coming, do not put pressure on you that I'm going to do this at the end of midnight on a day when I have to go sleep and I have to go enjoy my weekend. No, give yourself some time and then sit down and write it.
And Ellie?
I would say build a bank of work if you can. If you're a first-time award entrant, or it's good to just build up a bank of good stuff that's been happening within your business, because there's a lot of good work going on in that may not be showcased, or you may not think about it, but actually if you just start doing that as a habit, then actually when it comes to awards, you'll sit down and think, wow, we've got a lot within our agency or our department that we can showcase.
Yeah.
Steve mentioned it already, the collaboration piece. I think that's really, really key. And you can see when you read an award entry that, has brought people in and you've got all those opinions and facts and figures. I think that's really, really important. And take time about it. Don't be a lazy entrant. If you're going to enter, then actually give yourself enough time, collect all the relevant materials, review it, then get somebody else to review it. When I'm judging, I will kind of go through and judge everything, and then I score or kind of do my short list, and then I go away and I come back to it maybe on another day. And I think that's a good tip as well for when you enter awards. Don't just try and do it all in one go. Actually do your summary, get the bulk of the work together, and then come back with a fresh pair of eyes and review it and refine it and tweak it.
Thank you. Well, I'm just going to give mine for a finish up. So for me, storytelling, keep it concise, and make sure you have a really thorough proofing system. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that was really, really useful. If you are going to enter any of the Drum Awards, just the few points. One is they are all open globally. There's a couple of exceptions to the rule. We do the Digital Advertising Awards in APAC, and we do the Rosies, which is a regional competition. The rest are completely global. The other thing is we've now just launched new websites. So some of the old work isn't on there yet. We're just getting it put on. But if you do want to see previous case studies, if you get into the drum.com, there is a tab where you can see case studies. And also, if you want to cover your entry, when you enter, make sure you give us permission to do that, because some companies don't. And actually, some companies give us permission when they don't mean to. So make sure you get, but I would, if you're going to enter awards, I would make sure that you get as much leverage. And, we're a global platform, so make sure that we work hard for you guys. Yeah. So that is it. Hopefully you all learned a thing or two. The very, very best of luck. And we will hopefully see you at an awards show sometime soon. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.